Okay, let's get right into it. Today, in this explainer, we're exploring a deeply misunderstood but absolutely pivotal 12-year period in American history. We're talking about the era immediately following the Civil War, known as Reconstruction. Spanning from 1865 to 1877, this really is a missing chapter in our collective memory. As detailed in a massive report by the Equal Justice Initiative, this was an era defined by immense, fleeting hope for newly emancipated Black Americans, which was almost immediately met with staggering, highly organized violence. Okay, let's dive into this with a quote from George King. He was a formerly enslaved man from South Carolina, and he recalled how his emancipation was actually explained to him. He said, "The master, he says, we are all free, but it don't mean we is white, and it don't mean we is equal." That right there sets up a profound thematic truth for us today. The legal end of chattel slavery on paper did not magically guarantee safety, equality, or protection for Black Americans in reality.
Part 1. Journey to Freedom, Emancipation and Citizenship.
To really understand this era, we first have to wrap our heads around the dizzying legal mechanisms of emancipation. I mean, think about how wild this is. Over just 7 years, the United States fundamentally rewrote its constitution. It kicks off with the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 as a wartime measure. Then, the 13th Amendment officially abolishes slavery nationwide in 1865. But because Southern states fiercely resisted recognizing Black humanity, Congress had to push even further. You get the Civil Rights Act of 1866, the 14th Amendment in 1868 establishing birthright citizenship, and then the 15th Amendment in 1870 protecting voting rights. In a historical blink of an eye, these acts theoretically built a brand new legal foundation for Black Americans. Part 2. The Promise of Reconstruction, a Brief Window of Hope. The spade and the incredible agency with which emancipated Black Americans embraced these newly legislated rights was absolutely extraordinary. By 1868, over 80% of eligible Black men had registered to vote in the South. 80%! You see these massive, community-driven pushes to establish independent Black schools, the founding of early historically Black colleges, and this desperate, beautiful drive toward land ownership and economic independence. Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer scale of the political mobilization. It was massive. An estimated 2,000 Black men actually served in elected office during the Reconstruction era. We are talking about local sheriffs, state legislators, and federal representatives emerging from a population that, literally just years prior, was legally classified as property. And perhaps no story captures this rapid shift better than Senator Hiram Revels of Mississippi. In 1870, he became the very first African American elected to the United States Senate. And the poetic justice of history here is just incredible. He actually took a Senate seat that had previously been held by a white enslaver. Revels toured the country and was introduced to crowds everywhere as the 15th Amendment in flesh and blood. But here's the tragic reality. This immense political and social progress immediately triggered a calculated, extremely violent white backlash. Former Confederates and white supremacists formed groups like the Ku Klux Klan, and they initiated a campaign of systematic terror to completely roll back everything that had just been achieved.
Part 3. A terrifying backlash. Documenting the violence.
We just saw the number 2,000 a moment ago to represent political victory. Tragically, this exact same number returns here. Between 1865 and 1876, the EJI has documented at least 2,000 racial terror lynchings of Black men, women, and children. It is a staggering, solemn statistic that really drives home the sheer brutality emancipated people faced simply for trying to claim their freedom. And this brilliantly illustrates a crucial point. While most people naturally associate lynchings with the later Jim Crow era, the rate of documented lynchings during the short 12-year window of Reconstruction was actually nearly 3 times greater than the rate during the subsequent 74-year era of Jim Crow. The violence was dense, it was fast, and it was overwhelmingly lethal. Furthermore, this wasn't just isolated to individual attacks in the dead of night. During this era, there were at least 34 documented mass lynchings. We're talking about events where white mobs attacked entire Black communities, killing 3 or more people, and sometimes hundreds, in a single horrific event. The death tolls across the South were just horrifying. 138 killed in Mobile, Alabama, 200 killed in Opelousas, Louisiana, 150 in Colfax. These absolutely weren't riots. They were calculated massacres intended to suppress the Black vote, destroy Black economic progress, and instill absolute community-wide terror.
Part 4. The Mechanics of Terror, Systems of Oppression.
So the crucial point is, how exactly was this terror applied? Because this violence was not random. It was a highly organized system of control, divided largely into three main pillars: political violence to stop voting, economic intimidation to force emancipated people back into unpaid labor, and violence to enforce a strict racial social order, brutally punishing even the smallest perceived transgression against a white person. To bring the political violence down to a deeply human level, consider the story of Jack Dupree. He was a well-respected Black president of a local political club in Mississippi. In 1871, purely because of his political organizing, a mob of 60 Klansmen dragged him from his home and brutally murdered him right in front of his wife and young children. It was a clear, horrific message to anyone else thinking of stepping up to lead. On the economic side, intimidation was built directly into the system of sharecropping. Since the government failed to distribute land to freedmen, Black laborers had to work land they didn't own for a share of the crop. White landowners ruthlessly manipulated contracts and debts, effectively trapping Black families in a cycle of poverty for generations. And anyone who tried to negotiate or demand their fair pay, they were routinely met with mob violence. Let's move to and see how this builds directly into the criminal justice system through convict leasing. You see, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, except as a punishment for a crime. So Southern states just use this loophole to pass deeply discriminatory laws, criminalizing Black people for things as minor as vagrancy, and then literally leasing them out to private industries as unpaid, forced labor. It was exactly what historians call it: slavery by another name. Even the simple, quiet pursuit of education was viewed as a mortal threat to this racial hierarchy. Black literacy challenged the entire myth of white supremacy. Because of this, schools were violently targeted. In the fall of 1870 alone, white mobs burned nearly every single Black church and schoolhouse in Tuskegee, Alabama. Part 5. A Truth Needing Telling. The Missing Chapter. Just listen to the words of a freedman named Joe Easley in Texas in 1868. The reign of terror is set up in this county. The history of the darkest ages of the world does not, in my estimation, afford a parallel. It perfectly, heartbreakingly grounds us in the utter devastation, isolation, and total lack of federal protection that emancipated people experienced every single day. Ultimately, the federal government and the courts abandoned Reconstruction. They just walked away. The failure to protect emancipated Black Americans and the failure to hold the perpetrators of this violence accountable allowed these mobs to win. It directly established the foundation for a century-long era of persistent racial hierarchy, segregation, and injustice that followed. Which leaves us with this final thought for today's explainer. If we genuinely confront the staggering, organized violence that systematically dismantled Black progress during Reconstruction, how does that change our understanding of the roots of racial inequality today? It's a heavy, absolutely essential question. Because history isn't just about the past, right? It's the blueprint for the present. Thanks for learning with me today, and I really hope this sparks you to explore this vital missing chapter further.